White House Budget Office threatens mass firings if government shuts down. The White House Budget Office is telling federal agencies to prepare plans for mass firings in the event of a government shutdown, with instructions to target programs they are not legally required to continue. The directive, outlined in an Office of Management and Budget memo to agencies and obtained by CNN, represents a sharp break from the government's handling of past shutdown scenarios, and an escalation by the Trump administration amid a standoff with congressional Democrats over federal funding. In the memo, directs agencies to identify programs whose funds will lapse if Congress fails to meet the September 30 funding deadline and that have no alternative source of funding. Those programs should then be targeted for sweeping reductions in force that could permanently eliminate jobs that are deemed not consistent with President Donald Trump's priorities. We remain hopeful that Democrats in Congress will not trigger a shutdown and the steps outlined above will not be necessary, wrote in the memo. An spokesperson declined to comment. Politico first reported the details of the memo. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer called the memo an attempt at intimidation. Donald Trump has been firing federal workers since day one, not to govern, but to scare, Schumer said in a statement Wednesday evening. This is nothing new and has nothing to do with funding the government. These unnecessary firings will either be overturned in court or the administration will end up hiring the workers back, just like they did as recently as today. The threat of mass job losses across the government is likely to further intensify the partisan funding showdown over the next week, where Democrats have demanded a series of concessions in exchange for keeping the government open into November. Most notably, Democrats are insisting on an extension of the enhanced federal subsidies for Affordable Care Act coverage, which are set to lapse at year's end. The White House and congressional Republicans have so far refused, insisting on a so-called clean extension. Trump earlier this week canceled a planned meeting with Democratic leaders to discuss the funding impasse, issuing a blanket rejection of their demands. The memo on Wednesday doubled down on that stance, calling Democrats' position insane, and noting that it would continue to fund core Trump administration priorities in the event of a shutdown. The planning for mass firings in other areas of government, the office added, would proceed unless Democrats take up the administration's position and pass a clean funding extension. Gutting the federal workforce. The memo is the latest, and perhaps furthest reaching, effort by the Trump administration to overhaul and shrink the size of the federal workforce. In February, Trump signed an executive order directing agencies to draw up plans for a large-scale reduction in force. The results were mixed, with some agencies letting go sizable portions of their staffs, others walking back at least part of their layoffs and still others asking some employees who departed to return to their jobs. The current effort was foreshadowed in another memo that and the Office of Personnel Management sent to agencies in late February concerning the executive order. The memo directed department leaders to identify by March 13 all agency components and employees performing functions not mandated by statute or regulation who are not typically designated as essential during a lapse in appropriations. In another unusual move, OMB has yet to post agencies' shutdown contingency plans on its website, even though the federal government's funding will lapse in less than a week unless Congress acts. In its memo, wrote that it had received updated lapse plans from many, but not all, agencies to date. The plans detail which functions and employees are deemed essential during a shutdown and will continue despite the impasse. Those workers remain on the job, though many are not paid until Congress agrees to appropriate funding. Every government shutdown is different, but key services, including Social Security payments, law enforcement, air traffic control and border patrol, continue uninterrupted. Previous shutdowns have closed national parks and museums, stalled food inspections, canceled immigration hearings, and delayed some federal lending to homebuyers and small businesses, among other impacts. In March, the last time a federal government shutdown loomed before being averted, more than 1.4 million employees were deemed essential and would have had to report to work, according to Rachel Snyderman, Managing Director of Economic Policy at the Bipartisan Policy Center. About 750,000 of them would have continued to be paid since their salaries were funded through other sources. Another nearly 900,000 workers would have been furloughed without pay. Snyderman noted that the estimates did not include the layoffs and departures that occurred in the early weeks of the Trump administration. A spokesperson for the National Treasury Employees Union, the second largest federal workers union, said it has no knowledge of the memo, while the American Federation of Government Employees did not immediately respond to a request for comment. Left-leaning advocates decried the idea of using a shutdown to gut the federal workforce. Setting aside the question of legality, this would be an action of enormous self-harm inflicted on the nation, needlessly ridding the country of talent and expertise, said Bobby Kogan, a former official in the Biden administration and senior director of federal budget policy for the Center for American Progress. It's also extortive. Give us what we want in a funding fight, or we'll hurt the country. Trump cancels meeting with Democratic leaders, deepening risk of government shutdown as funding deadline looms. President Donald Trump scrapped a White House meeting with top congressional Democrats later this week, as the threat of a government shutdown looms over Washington. After reviewing the details of the unserious and ridiculous demands being made by the minority radical left Democrats in return for their votes to keep our thriving country open, I have decided that no meeting with their congressional leaders could possibly be productive, Trump wrote on his Truth Social platform Tuesday morning. The president also rattled off a list of demands he claims Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer and House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries want in exchange for their party's votes to keep the government funded and avert a shutdown on October 1. The pair had confirmed just shortly before that they were scheduled to meet with the president this week in the Oval Office. While a single meeting between Trump and the Democrats was unlikely to result in a swift deal to avert a shutdown altogether, it had been the most tangible indication yet that party leaders would come to the table to negotiate on funding. Now, with each party publicly trading barbs and refusing to cave, the prospect of a shutdown seems more serious than ever. Lawmakers left Washington on Friday for a week in their home districts without a path forward, after the Senate rejected both a House-passed 7-week government funding measure and a Democratic alternative. Republicans have argued their bill to fund the government through November 20 is a clean, continuing resolution, or CR, with only $30 million in extra security money for members of Congress, $58 million for security for the executive and judicial branch and a funding fix for D.C. to adjust a mistake in an earlier bill. The Democratic bill, meanwhile, included expensive health care changes, such as extending Enhanced Affordable Care Act subsidies that are set to expire at the end of the year. Republicans have argued it's inappropriate to add such provisions to a stopgap funding bill and that they should be negotiated as part of a year-end funding bill. Meeting pulled after call with top Republicans. Trump's move to cancel the Thursday meeting came after a conversation with GOP leaders Monday night, where they cautioned against deal-making with Democrats, according to a person familiar with the discussions. Trump spoke by phone with House Speaker Mike Johnson and Senate Majority Leader John Thune about the upcoming funding deadline, shortly after reports surfaced that the president was planning to meet with Schumer and Jeffries. On the call, the GOP leaders told the president that Schumer was seeking a shutdown brawl with him, and they panned Democrats' demand to make enhanced Obamacare subsidies permanent as essentially giving free health care to illegal migrants, that person said. Thune has been abundantly clear about what he thinks on this issue, and the president is aware of his position, one source familiar with the discussions told CNN. Johnson made a similar case against the Affordable Care Act enhanced premium subsidies inside the Capitol last week before lawmakers left town, telling reporters, "We're not going to pay for health care for illegal aliens, that's against the law, we're not doing that." Republican House Speaker Mike Johnson told reporters shortly before Trump's post that he and Senate Majority Leader John Thune would attend any meeting that took place with Democratic leaders, but he questioned whether a meeting was necessary. Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries have made just wild partisan demands that they're trying to attach to a very simple, short-term, very clean crossing. "We just want to keep the government open so our appropriators can continue to do their work," he told reporters, accusing his Democratic colleagues of trying to make a mockery of it. Democrats accused Trump of running away. Ahead of the cancellation, Schumer and Jeffries sought to center their funding demands around health care, much as they have in recent weeks. They were planning in the meeting, they said, to emphasize the importance of addressing rising costs, including the Republican healthcare crisis, and argued it was past time to meet and work to avoid a Republican-caused shutdown. But after it became clear they would not have their anticipated audience with the president, the party leaders struck a much sharper tone. Jeffries invoked a phrase on X that has been known to irk the president: "Trump always chickens out," while Schumer, who would have to deliver Republicans 7 votes to pass the GOP stopgap measure in the Senate, accused Trump of throwing a tantrum and running away from the negotiating table before he even gets there. Jeffries also told his House members they should return to Washington Monday, even though GOP leaders canceled votes on the eve of the funding deadline. "Democrats will be in town and prepared to get the job done," he wrote. Johnson appeared unlikely to bring members back to Washington early, maintaining that the current plan was to keep lawmakers in their home districts. "We got our work done in the House. We got it done early with regard to the funding," he told reporters Tuesday. People had a lot to do back in their districts, and so were on the ready at any time, but the plan would be to come back when it's necessary. But the current plan is to not have session days on September 29 and 30. Trump left the door open Tuesday to meeting in the future, provided Democrats become realistic about the things our country stands for. Those talks would be necessary, Jeffries said, if Republicans wanted Democratic votes. We have to have a conversation with Donald Trump or Republican leaders in the Congress in order to try to find common ground in ways that can prevent a government shutdown if Republicans expect Democratic votes, Jeffries said during a press conference in Brooklyn.